Moneyweb at midday for all your up-to-date stories.
A routine traffic stop became a frightening experience for one motorist when he was threatened with arrest because he did not have his physical driver's license with him. Now, we know this person's identity, but he has asked us to withhold his name. And he joins us now to explain what happened and why the encounter left him confused about both his rights and the powers of the officers involved. So welcome and thank you very much for joining us. You were threatened with arrest. What happened and what exactly did the officer say?
Thank you so much. Yesterday in the morning, around 9 o'clock in Pretoria and Gezina, I get stopped at a traffic light. So I make a turn and immediately I see two blue lights behind me. It's two gentlemen in balaclavas on motorbikes. And my worry now is, why am I being stopped just randomly for turning? So immediately I comply, I find a safe spot, I quickly park, the officer pulls to my right and says, "Sir, are you aware you actually skipped a red robot?" That's where the incident starts. And I say, "What do you mean, a red robot? I stopped and I just turned." He says, No, you actually took off before it turned green." And I said, okay, here comes a bit of trouble, but nonetheless, I'm late for a meeting, so let me compose myself and not, almost like get into an altercation. So I simply say, okay, officer, if that is the case, you are the interpreter of the situation. I do apologize. However, maybe it's because I am in a bit of a rush and I maybe have faulted by skipping the red robot, as you say. So I'm really just trying to comply here. Given my incidents with police in the past, I know that once the matter gets aggravated, you are on the back foot throughout the entire discussion. Now the interesting part comes. The officer says, "Sir, I need your driver's license." And immediately, to my panic, I was stopped in a roadblock yesterday, so I know for a fact my driver's license is on me. I look for it in my wallet, it's not there. I look for it in the cabbie, I don't see it. I look for it in my little handbag, it's not there. Immediately, I'm getting agitated. Okay, calm down. Look in the car. I say, "Officer, please just bear with me for 2 minutes. I just need to tell my colleague that I am running late for a meeting. I told them I'm turning the corner and I'm literally down the road. So let me just inform them." He says to me, "Okay, so it's okay, do that." Quickly, I pull out my phone, boom, I text my colleague, "Listen, I'm on the way. I've been stopped by cops." I leave it at that. I continue looking for the license. After frisking the car, Jeremy, literally in panic for about now close to 4 to 5 minutes of just searching the car, below the seats, everything. I go to the passenger seat and then immediately I say, you know what? Actually, there's no need for me to go into this frenzy. Let me give him my ID. So I produce my ID. I hand it over to him. I say, "Sir, unfortunately, I can't find my license, but due to time constraints, can I please ask that you take my ID and you check my license? It's valid. I don't have traffic infringements. I don't have a suspended license. I just happen not to have it in person." What does the officer say? The officer says, "Sir, are you aware of the new auto rules?" I'm saying, "Which one? The demerit system?" He says, "No, the demerit system is on pause." I say, "I'm very much aware of the demerit system and aware that it's being rolled out in specific municipalities. However, it's been put forward for next year." So now, Jeremy, mind you, I think I can consider myself to be a bit of a well-informed South African citizen who complies with the law. In my profession, I deal a lot with public safety campaigns and all of these nature of interpreting policy law to simplify messaging to ordinary South Africans, right? So now I'm in a bit of a tiz. He says, "Are you aware that due to the new auto rules, when I stop you and you don't have your license on you, it is a offense?" I say, "An offense? What do you mean by offense?" He says, "Sir," his colleague then pulls out the book and both of them come to me and say, "You see this highlighted section? What driver's license code do you have?" I say, it says code 10. He says, "If that's the case, sir, so the fines on the infringements for other stuff has gone up, but the most critical one in this moment is that I need to make an arrest." "An arrest? So please make it make sense. For what exactly?" He says, "No, the rule here says, you see on these columns, it shows me on the book, some other charges have infringement, some others have offense. If it's written offense, we must make an immediate arrest and take you to the police station." I said, "Sir, in not to order argue with you, but do you think that is the right interpretation of the law? That you need to arrest me for not having a license in person, which is valid and you can actually validate on the phone?" He says, "You know what, sir, unfortunately, I'm in a position where from our training, this is what we've been told. I said, what kind of training are you referring to? He says, no, we were actually in training about 2 weeks ago and we raised this thing. Look, mind you, to the credit of the cop, he was not abrasive and he was not agitated, like trying to be aggressive. He was simply just saying, this is my interpretation, this is my understanding, and we both have to make an arrest, and therefore, can you please start to make arrangements? Immediately, I take my phone, Jeremy, I take a video to my colleague. I say, colleagues, I am actually getting arrested by the cops for not having my license on me, and I'm in a bit of a panic, but I don't know, maybe I'll call a lawyer. Then I hang up. I say, you know what? Perhaps conversations will also just inform me more about what is leading to this misfortunate position. I don't want to call a lawyer. It's going to cause a scene. Sir, how can we best make this thing, clear for me so that I know when I get to the police station, what am I going to be charged with, so I can inform the person who maybe may need to come fetch my car? Am I going to be detained? What is the procedure? He says, sir, to be quite honest, if I have to take you to the police station, the police then, I'll hand you over, they'll have to process and take it from there. Now, immediately, a few things then come to mind, Jeremy. One, I think any unlawful arrest immediately traumatizes me, having been in altercations with the cops, but just generally knowing the kind of temperature that, is experienced by South Africans. I said to the policeman, sir, are you not supposed to be serving and protecting rather than keep creating fear and intimidation? Because for me, that's really the position I always ask with the police. I find that sometimes it gives them a bit of a jerk reaction to go into drastic punitive measures, unlike resolving through dialogue and conversation. I said, I don't want to miss work. I don't want to end up with a reputation damage. I don't want to be in a financial loss dealing with lawyers in relation to the situation. How can we make this thing sensible to me so I can relay it to the next person and know what position I've gotten myself into? He says we pushed back ourselves as the people who need to carry this thing out. And I've found myself in a position where I've dealt with motorists who are not aware of the fact that the law has changed. I said, but what information has been sent out to the public about what you are saying? He says, no. We ordinarily tell people, like now when I have to make this arrest on the side of the road, red flag number 3. I mean, why is this no public education about such things? So immediately, Jeremy, the situation escalated very quickly. 28 minutes later, the cop says to me, sir, you know what? I just feel like the next thing I have to go to court, and then I have to find myself having to prove the fact that you didn't have your license. And if you now deny, I must now, he just says, you know what? So here's your ID. Good luck with your meeting. You can carry on. That's literally the only thing that allowed me to continue with my trip 30 minutes later, purely because the guy felt like, one, he doesn't want to go to court for something that is not provable in law. And I said, if I come to court and I produce my license, I say, I had it on the day. It was just in my seat. What then do we do? And then that just became, I think, the one thing that almost saved the day. But essentially, that's the discussion.
Thank you very much indeed. Now to what the law actually says. Motorists are required to carry their driver's license, but forgetting the card at home is not the same as never being licensed. There's also considerable confusion over whether an officer can arrest a driver, whether the license can be checked electronically, and whether there is a 24-hour period in which to present the card at a police station. I want to get some clarity now on what officers can and cannot do and what recourse our motorist now has. I'm joined in that respect by Road Traffic Infringement Authority spokesperson Monde Mkalipi. So Monde, must a motorist carry the physical license card every time they drive?
Yes, Jeremy. I think let's please make this point quite clear. In terms of Schedule 3 of the ARTO regulations, we have like Charge 1710. That says if a motorist operated a motor vehicle whilst he or she did not keep a driving license or a document or any other prescribed authorization in the said vehicle, that is an infringement, and that warrants a 1,000 rands fine. But perhaps let's also create a distinction here, Jeremy. There is also another regulation or a charge that says it's 1707. That says if a motorist operated a motor vehicle without a driving license issued to him or her, or any document deemed to be a driving license, then that becomes an offense. So there are two things here. The first one, the one that I indicated, is we have a motorist not having a driving license in his possession or her possession while operating a vehicle. that remains an infringement. Because in this instance, you have a motorist who has been issued with a driving license, but at that point in time, he or she does not have it in his or her possession. That remains an infringement. But if the driving license was never issued, that is an offense. Then the person needs to be arrested on the spot. So in this particular case of the motorist that we have interviewed earlier on, the gentleman does indicate quite clearly well that he does have his driving license, but he unfortunately does not have it in the vehicle at that time. But he is able to prove that he has got positive form of identification that traffic officers or police can use to check on the system if indeed he or she does have the driving license. So we have to be able to create that distinction, Jeremy, to say if it was never issued and it cannot be proven that it was ever issued, then that becomes an offense. It is the person need to be arrested. So in this instance, the poor gentleman, what should have been happened here is that because he insists that he does have it, but not in his possession at that time, then the officers should have perhaps checked on the system. Yes, indeed, you do have it, but we are still going to issue you with a 1,000 rand fine, which he can still go forward and still dispute it. But of course, perhaps it might not be a winnable matter because the law says the driving license must be in your possession at the time you operate the vehicle, at the time you are stopped by the police or any officer of the law. So we should be able to create those two matters here, Jeremy.
In this particular case, did the officer either overreach or misinterpret the regulation by threatening arrest?
I think because these regulations, Jeremy, are relatively new, and I think it's quite important that we, as the Road Traffic Infringement Authority, do embark on a quite an intensive public education drive that involves our own officers so that we are able to interpret these regulations quite accurately. So perhaps in a way, there was a bit of a misinterpretation of the regulation, especially if the motorist is saying, yes, I do have it, but not, unfortunately, I can't find it at the moment. Because what could have happened, they could have checked if perhaps they had interpreted the regulation quite accurately to say, well, let us check. If you do have it, but not in your possession at this time, then we're going to issue with a fine. Not to say, if you don't have it in your possession, then you are facing arrest. That is an incorrect interpretation of the regulation in this instance.
And in this particular case, would it also have been up to the officer's discretion just to let that person go?
Yes, it is quite important that they do use their discretion, but at the same time, I think they should really stick to their role of enforcing the law. Because if a person does not have the driving license, and I think perhaps it should not have been stressed this much, because all that could have happened here was they could have just issued the gentleman with an infringement notice instead of threatening him to take him to the police station or with an arrest. They could have just issued him with a 1710 charge fine and then he goes. Because we can say that, well, we do need to ensure that we engage deeper. But I think what you can also indicate, Jeremy, these regulations and these charges are still undergoing a review because ARTO, its expansion now, is a relatively new phenomenon, as we have just indicated now a few weeks ago, that we're expanding it to other municipalities. So there is a process that is underway to review these regulations so that they are not open to misinterpretation, they are also not open to abuse by anyone who is supposed to enforce them on the roads.
Do you think this particular incident was an isolated case, or have you heard of other similar experiences?
Well, when we're going through these regulations, I think there needs to be a few isolated incidences that we also need to look at. That's why we are saying there is a process of reviewing some of these regulations so that they are not open to any form of misinterpretation by those our colleagues who are supposed to enforce them. So it might not necessarily be an isolated incident. There could be few of them popping up around perhaps the municipalities where the ARTO is being implemented. And I think it's a matter that we are looking at, as I've just said now, that we are reviewing some of these to ensure that there is accurate interpretation and implementation of these charges by our officers on the road.
Mondi Mkalepi speaks for the Road Traffic Infringement Authority. Thank you very much indeed.